Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Here's a scenario that might sound familiar. You've got good people all around you. You know it. Your leadership team knows it. But when a critical role opens up, you look around and you realize that those great people, they're not prepared yet. You haven't been building your pipeline. And now you're either promoting someone before they're ready, or you're starting an expensive external search when you probably already had the raw material to develop someone into that role right in front of you. This is one of the most common and costly problems in organizations today, and most leaders don't address it until they're already in the gap. Jeremy Hanna has spent 20 years solving this exact problem inside Fortune 500s and fast-growing companies. He's built the frameworks, run the programs, had the hard conversations with leadership teams who are hoarding talent without realizing it, and he's seen what's possible when organizations finally decide to treat the development of their people as seriously as they take the stewardship of their other metrics. But even the person who helps everyone else build better systems can lose their footing. A few years back, Jeremy found himself burned out, questioning not just his role, but whether he still wanted to do this work that he dedicated his career to at all. So he made a bold call. He and his wife sold everything and spent a couple years traveling the world. 21 countries, 21 nuanced cultures, every kind of conversation you can imagine. The thing is, he wasn't running away. He was pressing pause long enough to remember why any of it mattered. What he found was something he hadn't realized he'd even lost: his curiosity. And with it, a renewed clarity about the work he loved. That journey, it brought him back. Not to a corporate role, but to something he'd always wanted to build. Today, he's co-founder of Viante Talent Solutions, where he coaches individuals and guides organizations towards sustainable, authentic talent development. So in our conversation, we're getting practical. What does a real talent ecosystem look like? Where do organizations start? And what does it actually cost to ignore this? Let's get started. Here's my conversation with Jeremy Hanna. Hello, Jeremy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. This is great. Listen, Jeremy, I want to jump right in with 2 feet. You have recently taken an inspiring sabbatical, and I just want to tell you that I have always been a fan of people who make big, bold moves, who do the thing that changes direction, who sees that opportunity. I know it's something that I deeply value, and I always try to lean into that a little bit more in my own life. But I just want to hear a little bit about that story. What led you to making a bold move like that? And what did you learn about yourself along the way?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I've been in talent management, leadership development for 20 odd years. And back in 2022, 23, I was feeling really, really burnt out for a number of reasons. I think I was not in a great fit for my role, maybe some challenges with leadership, these types of things. But it was really affecting me for my mental health and my physical health. And I was looking for other jobs and trying to make a move to find something that was a better fit. And the more I looked at different jobs, the more I was like, this just feels like more of the same. And I was questioning whether I still wanted to do what I do. That's how sort of deep I was
Yeah.
in terms of burnout. And then, but also just questioning, like, what happens if I jump to another corporate job and it's just more of the same?
Right.
And so my wife and I were talking, and we still have an argument to this day of who said it first. But one of us said, what if we just sold everything and traveled the world for the next year? It's a unique situation that we have because we don't have any children. We don't have pets. We weren't really beholden to where we were living. So we could sell our house and those sorts of things. But the more we talked about it, the more we just kept saying, why not? Why not? Why not? And one thing is something she and I always have held as a value in our relationship is never to be complacent. And it felt like just moving to another corporate job was sort of more of the same, kind of being complacent. And so we ultimately said, yep, this is right. This feels right. Let's take a stab. If for no other reason, for my personal health.
Yeah.
And that was the impetus of it. So in May of 2024, we packed everything up and we've been traveling the world ever since.
That is really awesome because really, I just heard this again the other day. And of course, we all know this. We've all heard this somewhere along the way, but like nobody gets to the end of their life and they're like, God, I should have stayed in that job that I hated so much. No, not that you didn't say that. You didn't say that. But like, I should have worked harder. I should have worked more. I should, no, what do we say? We say, I wish I would have done that bold thing that I always wondered if I could have done. And I just think about that all the time. And I'm so glad you did it. So, where in the world are you today?
I'm in Perth, Western Australia. We've been here for about a year. We have a lot of friends and family here. So it's a beautiful summer day here.
Oh, how beautiful is that? I love hearing that. Okay, so you've landed back in the space of talent development. You've gone out on your own. You've created your own business. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was questioning whether or not I even wanted to do that. And so I actually neglected what part of your question was sort of what I learned along the way. And that's really what I learned along the way is like, no, I really enjoy what I do. I love working with people. I love helping people grow and thrive in their jobs, as well as I still really enjoy the strategic side of what we do in this space, really helping companies to create those talent ecosystems that allow them to holistically develop their people in a more strategic way, just like they look at, their financials or their sales numbers, those types of things. And so anyway, I got to a place where I was like, okay, well, do I want to go back to a corporate job? I don't know. I've always wanted to do this coaching thing. And I've always had in the back of my mind that one day, sort of like quote unquote, one day I'd like to start a consulting firm and do this work, be my own boss and work whenever and wherever I want. And it just felt like the right time to take the leap. And my wife and I created Viante Talent Solutions, which is our coaching and consulting firm. And we've been doing it about 8 months now.
Yeah.
So we're still kind of getting up and running, but so far so good. It's been really rewarding working with people directly who are in some sort of career transition. In some instances, very much like I was, and I've been helping people work through being laid off and finding a new job or feeling like they're stuck in a role and how do they sort of navigate their way and that feels authentic to them.
That is so great. I feel like if I had time for another career, that might be a direction I would go. Just because, Jeremy, I feel like, the workplace is made up of people. And on an individual level, I always think about that. I want people to be happy, fulfilled, find meaningful work, thrive in their role, feel that sense of progress, and I feel like we need coaching on that. Everyone needs coaching on that periodically throughout their career journey. If they're growing, if they're developing, the only other option is sort of staying stuck or I know that there are people who are wired to be very steady in a role and I love that. I think that's fantastic. So I'm not excluding that as being very important. Like this is what I want to do with my life. I want to go to this job and I want to do a great job at it. And I love the steadiness of it. And then I want to have a life outside. Yay. But on the other hand, even in those roles, I know there's so many pivot points that we need some guidance and we need to really think, is this still working for me? Let's say you're that person and you're in that steady role and you're doing a great job but something happens and leadership changes or the environment changes or this or that. And then that beautiful thing that you had built for yourself doesn't feel so right anymore. So those are the situations.
To your point, even sometimes it's your personal life situations have changed. I remember early on in my career when I was doing this internally for corporate jobs that I had, I was doing a workshop and somebody came up to me afterwards and he was like, because I was talking about sort of the career lattice. And so you don't just climb up, you can go sideways, you can maybe take a step back and reorient where you're going. This person came up to me and said, you know what, I did what you're talking about in terms of taking a step back in my career to find better work-life balance because my job had moved and it was like another hour away from my commute.
Yeah.
I ended up taking a new job that allowed me to be much closer to my family because I have young kids and that's where I really want to be. So like it can be rewarding in any of those directions. And going back to your point about coaching just really quick is the thing that I often say to people is you look at professional athletes at the height of their career, the best in the world doing what they do.
Yes.
They all have coaches.
Right.
Why don't we, as in our careers, look at it the same way and say, I need a coach to help me hone my skills, to help navigate through, a cold streak, so to speak, if somebody's not hitting their baskets or whatever. And so it's the same thing. And so we all need just that little bit of outside perspective to hone where we're at.
Absolutely. Or to your point, not just a cold streak, but like, what if I got a coach to just help me keep doing what I'm doing well, or help me keep refining what I'm doing and finding my own growing edge? So many opportunities there. And so now let's look at that organizational perspective, because again, I know in my own work, I hear a lot of leaders come to me and say, we don't have a well developed talent pipeline for many reasons. Some of those reasons are we don't have a system. Some of those reasons are we don't have the budget. We can't prepare a person for a future role until we're ready to put them in it. And by that time, the person that was in it is gone. So we don't have any overlap. In fact, I was just communicating with someone earlier today about this very thing around, she's looking out at her workforce and she's trying to entice people to look forward and think about the role that they will want. But what she's getting is pushback, people saying, I'm not going to do that job or try out new responsibilities unless you're paying me for it. Right? I guess that was probably a double or triple barreled question there. But what are you seeing from an organizational perspective? Like, what is holding organizations back from doing a better job with that structured talent development that helps people really prepare for their future roles?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is organizationally speaking, how and culturally speaking within the organization, how much are you actually looking at talent development as sort of a cultural imperative? And part of the reason why I say that is because if you're starting to have conversations about your succession planning and having people in a pipeline for future development, you can't just look in a silo. And so what happens often is, especially leaders who are maybe, kind of covetous of the good people that they have, they hoard those people and they don't let the other team see how good they are or what kind of potential they actually have to grow in the organization, maybe outside of what they do. So breaking down those barriers, because I really do think talent management is a team sport and the leadership needs to get together and say, okay, who's all of our great people? That's number one. Number two is, do you have a set of skill sets that you're looking for as an organization? Because it's less about the technical skills when you get to this level, and it's more about the leadership skills, but agility, learning agility, emotional intelligence, those types of things are so much more powerful to try and identify in the people that you have. So what are those skill sets that you're looking to really help you identify those leaders? And I think that those are kind of the key ones, but there's a few other things.
Well, let's just kind of like lay out a simple view of what good talent development slash succession planning might look like in an organization. What does it look like? What are some of these plans and programs? How are they structured?
So I always like to look at it from a like build, buy, borrow perspective. So it's the three B's. Some people say five B's, but basically, what skill sets do you need to build up in the organization? So who are you growing? Who are you developing internally, sending to trainings, giving stretch assignments to, those types of things? What do you need to borrow? So that's really more about what kind of contractors and those types of things that you might need to borrow talent. And then buying talent is really just going out externally to hire people who have those skill sets you need to bring them in. So sort of understanding what your landscape is from there. And then in terms of creating a talent ecosystem that is driving towards, really strong pipelines, I kind of think of it in three ways as well. I like a framework. So it's people, process, and platform. So first looking at, like I said, that's really kind of the people part is sort of the build, buy, borrow piece. But then looking at the process. So do you have the processes in place where you're systematically looking at talent and having the conversations on a regular basis? Having conversations with the employees themselves so that you don't run into things like what you were just saying, where somebody's like, well, I don't want to be stretched in that way. That's not really what I aspire to do.
Right.
Making sure you have an understanding of who your people are and then having a strong process. And then having the platform behind it. So there's lots of tools out there like Workday and Success Factors and those types of things that can give you a structured way to capture all that data and start to look at what are some of the analytics behind it and start to quantify, do we have people in the pipeline? Do we have enough people in some of the more critical roles? And how are we moving our people around the organization to give them broader exposure to the business and that make them more prepared for roles in the future?
Okay. Forgive me if I'm overstepping here, but it sounds to me a little bit like the success of these programs might be predicated on a few things. One, if you have kind of a clear culture. I don't know if that's a necessity, but let me just lay these out and then I want you to respond to them. So, do you have some really clear, solid values that you're really willing to stand behind? It sounds like if you did, this would be more successful because you would really know what you're looking for.
Hmm.
Two, it sounds like this would be more successful if people had clear job roles, but not rigid job roles, or that if roles and processes were clear within the organization. I talk to a lot of leaders who struggle with role clarity. Like I know what my job description says, but I'm not sure how that relates to what I'm supposed to do each day when I get here. Maybe I'm seeing that wrong. And then third, I was thinking that the success of this is sort of predicated on someone paying attention inside the organization, which in a lot of the organizations I work in, which are small to mid-size, less than 5,000 employees, people feel stretched thin. They probably don't have a dedicated person. Well, maybe at 5,000 or 4,000 employees or something, but like 2,000, 2,500 employees. I know a lot of organizations that have HR, but they don't have necessarily a dedicated person that's looking at talent development, talent management, and those kinds of things. Give me some feedback on those. Am I seeing this wrong? Is there any validity in those three areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the first one, having a culture of development where it's just ingrained in who you are as an organization and should be part of your employee value proposition so that you're attracting people who have aspirations to continue to grow.
Yes.
The second one, you were talking about sort of the rigidity of roles and having structure to the roles and that sort of thing. I think also with smaller companies or companies that are growing, the ability to be more agile is more important than necessarily putting people into specific boxes for in terms of like role responsibilities and that sort of thing. So while having that structure is good, I also think you can create structure by identifying critical skill sets and working towards building those critical skill sets within your organization. Again, whether it's building it within the organization, kind of buying it and bringing it in, et cetera. So yeah, I bet otherwise, I think that's right.
And what about like number three, having a dedicated internal person, at least a champion or little department of champions? Like, how do organizations do this when, again, perhaps they have HR, but their HR, I know a lot of organizations that have HR and they actually have pretty robust HR departments, but those folks are focused on benefits and compliance practices and things like that, and not necessarily dedicated to ensuring talent development and the talent pipeline is full.
Yeah. I think I kind of go back to the values and culture one as well is to your point of champions is if you don't have those specific roles internally, then the leadership kind of needs to be the champion of that culture and be focused on developing talent as part of their roles.
Right.
They look at financials, they look at sales, they look at all of these other things in terms of the operations of the business and making sure everything is going the right way. Why don't we do that when we look at our talent as well? Because all those other things I just mentioned in terms of financials and sales and operations don't work without the right people who can actually get it done for you in an effective and efficient way. So making sure that there is a real focus within the leadership teams that push down that desire to develop people and start to stretch and test people in different ways and bring them up along the way. But yeah, it's got to be sort of ingrained in the culture. And you're right. Even in some of the corporations that I've worked at, It's a hard thing to build. So I highly recommend for smaller businesses out there or scaling businesses is do that as soon as you can, because having those things in place will make it easier. Even if you don't have a person sort of watching the processes, you'll start to build that muscle memory within the leadership to create that part of the culture.
Yeah, I feel like that commitment on the part of leadership, just time and time and time again. I know that when I speak to leaders who are truly champions of people development, their whole organization feels different. I mean, everything in the organization feels different when the leadership, it's not just box they're checking, it's not words on a poster, it's a belief system that they have in how they operate and how they do business. And I feel like that is just so powerful. So, when you encounter an organization that doesn't have such commitment or isn't managing their talent pipeline, what are some of the costs that organization is paying that they might not even be aware of yet?
The first one is just the cost of hiring people, because if you're constantly looking externally, typically it costs a lot more to bring people in, especially if you're relocating them. It can be really, really expensive. So that's the first one that is pretty easy to see. But it's also, how do you start to, and this is always a hard thing and sort of the hard sell, I'll be honest, is how do you connect the efficiency of the work you're doing and making sure that your operations are running smoothly back to these talent and development culture and processes and that sort of thing. It's hard to have a one for one when you look at that. But as you're thinking about what are your critical aspirations for the business or your critical strategic objectives that you're going towards,
Yeah,
I always say, first take a look at, do you have the skill sets to get you there? Like, people who are moving or wanting to expand into AI and that sort of stuff. Do you have the people that can actually do that work?
right.
You're going to spin your wheels more if you don't have the right people who can actually do that work. And so it's going to cost you more over the long term to get that, to hit that mark that you're trying to get to from a strategic objective perspective.
Right. Okay. So there's the cost of hiring, there's the very hard to track costs of just people stagnating. There's the costs of trying to do things that you haven't developed. You don't have talent around you to do yet, or you don't know because you haven't really had those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, I could imagine very hard to track numerically, but it just sort of makes common sense to me. We all know this. When you find somebody that is just a superstar, you're like, I don't care what you do. You need to come and join my team.
Yeah.
I feel like my little team is a bunch of people like that. Like, let's just keep trying until we find whatever it is that makes your heart sing.
Yeah. And to your point, you're going to need to find people like that. You also mentioned, sort of you call it the steady eddies, or the people who are just happy in their job. They're doing a good job. They're doing everything that they're asked of, and they clock out when it's time to go home. And you need that. That is the core of your business. Most people are going to be in the middle of that bell curve when you think about like people at the highest level of performance and potential and people maybe who need to transition or do something different. It's all those people in the middle. And going back to your point is, how do you continue to just sort of pull at those strings to say, hey, would you be interested in doing this or doing that? Sometimes it's about them transferring their knowledge to somebody else.
Right.
So making sure that, going back to the culture of development, also thinking about not necessarily just the leadership roles, but do we have the technical skill sets and the institutional knowledge that's being transferred within the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's imagine I am a mid-size professional, in HR listening to this podcast. Hello, my friends. I know you're out there. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I want to double down on this. I need to take a closer look at what we're doing. Where do they start, Jeremy? Where does somebody really start to build these programs for themselves? Maybe even in the scrappy way, maybe even in a, okay, let's just get started kind of a way. And assuming that they do have that commitment to talent development that we've talked about being such a key component.
I think the place that we would start is in just kind of looking at, taking a step back and looking at what's happening at the ground level with managers and their employees. Like, are they having career conversations? Are they talking about development on a regular basis? These are some of the scrappy, simple things that can be put in place. I know even having conversations sometimes is hard for leaders, but if you're trying to think about more of a grassroots approach that doesn't really cost you much, really building in that muscle memory for leaders that it becomes part of the expectation of their job to be building the talent and the next generation of leaders that are coming up. That's an easy place that you can go without having to build and invest a lot of money. And then, if you're thinking about actually sort of building a broader talent ecosystem, I think you just need to start looking at, are there processes in place that allow you to actually systematically do that throughout the organization? And so you're looking at, do we have regular conversations at the leadership level about who the talent is, how we're developing them? The other piece of that, going back to your cost point, is a way that you can manage money is through these conversations is you start to say, okay, the people that we think have the greatest performance and have the highest potential, we want to really invest in them. So you're putting your money sort of where it's always a gamble. You never know until people actually get there and perform, but you're differentiating how you're spending your money so that it is going towards the things that are most critical to you, whether it's creating your leadership pipeline or building up skill sets within the organization. So those types of processes, I always say also that it's an ecosystem. So you have to think about the connectivity of all those processes along the way. So succession planning and talent review, connecting to the performance management process, connecting to, your employee engagement if you have some level of understanding of your employees and do they want to grow? Do they feel like they're being developed within the organization? Sometimes it's just about asking those questions to them to understand what their pain points are and also what they're really looking for to develop themselves. So you then kind of hit it from both sides in terms of what people want, but also what you need strategically.
Got it. That's great. Okay, so a few easy things there. Just to reiterate, like career conversations. I love a good career conversation. And so I would just want to put this out there and see if you agree. I learned this from a friend who was actually on this podcast fairly recently, Frances Robustelli. She long ago introduced me to this idea of people having these career conversations where you sit down and you say, where do you see yourself growing inside or outside of this organization in the coming years? And I've always loved that question. And I've gotten pushback, from different leaders along the way because they're like, why would I want to ask my people if they want to leave me and sort of plant that idea in their heads, And two, what if they tell me something and I don't have a role for them to grow into? I want to keep those people, like these are the kinds of thoughts and things that come about. And also, three, I've heard people say, my manager asked me this and, I'm not sure I want to share. Is it safe for me to share that I may have other aspirations beyond this role? So, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think you have to have a comfort level with the organization and the employee value proposition because the goal and those types of things where when you really start having conversations of like, okay, so we're at a place now where you're ready to move up and you want to move up, but organizationally, structurally speaking, we just don't have something for you right now. And so what we want to do is support you in your career. And even if that means you leaving the organization, because those people are so much more likely to then come back once they feel like they've gotten the experience they need from those external organizations. And then they might leap into a higher level in terms of the leadership pipeline itself. I understand both sides of that conversation, but you really need to be confident in your employee value proposition and sort of how committed people are to your company and that sort of thing before kind of jumping into that boat. But I think
Right.
it's a great question to start to show people that, like, look, no matter what, we're invested in you. And so I think that's actually demonstrates a powerful dedication to developing talent.
That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, this has been very enlightening. Thank you very much. How do you think your sabbatical prepared you for the work that you're doing now? Taking that break, taking that time away.
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you again for having me. A couple things jump out at me is one is I realized as we were out on the road and visiting, we've hit 21 countries over the last 2 years. I rediscovered my curiosity. I didn't realize I had lost it, but then once I found it again, I was like, I forgot to be curious and ask a lot of questions. And that's sort of all what a coach is being curious and asking a lot of questions. It's all what a consultant is being curious and asking a lot of questions to help, create the path forward. So there's that. And then related to that is being prepared to learn from anyone that you're coming in contact with. So the places that my wife and I, that were the most impactful were the ones where we kind of got out of our comfort zone the most. So, places like Northern Africa and Turkey and some other countries are places that we had never experienced before. But once we were there, again, we kind of use that curiosity to ask a lot of questions. And the more that you ask those questions, the more people get excited to talk about who they are and where they're from and their food and
Yeah.
talk about all those kind of things. And so just really learning from anyone that you can as you're traveling the world. And I'll say that again, as much as you can, travel, travel, travel. I think the experience of getting out into the world and sort of maybe breaking your bubble a little bit is life changing to most people I know.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And I'm so glad you reconnected with that curiosity because there's got to be, if there's one quality that enhances your own well being as much as the well being of everyone around you, it's got to be curiosity.
I totally agree. Absolutely.
Where can people connect with you, Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks. LinkedIn and Instagram. My name is Jeremy Hanna. My actual handle is at Jeremy B. Hanna. And then you can always go to Viante, Viante, viantetalent.com. Find us there and connect with us there too.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Wow. If you've ever looked around your organization and sensed that your people have more to give than the system is allowing, today's conversation was definitely for you. Jeremy reminded us that building a real talent pipeline isn't a luxury reserved for large, well resourced organizations. It's a cultural decision first. It starts with leaders who are willing to see their talent collectively, invest in career growth, and let go of the instinct to hold their best people away from other opportunities. But what I keep coming back to is the through line in Jeremy's own story. Here's someone who spent 2 decades teaching organizations how to develop their people, and it took stepping all the way out, crossing 21 countries and getting genuinely uncomfortable before he rediscovered the curiosity that makes him truly extraordinary at this work. That's not irony, my friends. That's a reminder. The investment in development or developing people that we're asking organizations to make, we have to be willing to make that investment in ourselves too. Don't forget that. I'm so grateful to Jeremy for his generosity and his honesty in this conversation. You can connect with Jeremy on LinkedIn and Instagram at Jeremy B. Hanna, or find Viante Talent Solutions at viantetalent.com. And here's what I want to leave you with. Who on your team hasn't had a real career conversation in the last year? Think about it. Then go have a chat. That is a great place to start. See you next time.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.